Today I'm comparing two Corsair all-in-one water cooling radiators. First up I have an h100, the original, and my h100i GTX that I've been using for many years now. This I found on eBay. Someone scrapped it. I guess the pump blew out. I already removed the hoses, and we are about to do the same with this one. Overall appearances between these two immediately, there's a couple differences here. They're both 240s, so dual 120mm fans. Mounting is completely different. It looks like these things were tapped and countersunk. This also has a sheen to it, almost like a semi-gloss finish, and the GTX has the matte finish. As far as scale goes, the h100i GTX appears to be possibly a different OEM, even though these should both technically be from Asus or Asus, however you want to say that. Basically, it's the OEM for many different all-in-one coolers, including the thermal takes. I believe the new, it's not EK, the, hopefully. Oh, there we go, a little suction. So technically, if you want to do this, or change your tubes, oh, there we are. Wow, that is a lot larger. There's a lot of water coming out of there. Goodness, I'm making a mess. Alright. Crap. It was about time I drained this anyway. It looks a little milky for some reason. I've never opened this before. You've seen it the first time. It's mostly clear. Stinks like antifreeze. That enough? Just want to get it off enough so I don't have to spill it everywhere. It smells like antifreeze. Strange. Okay. I just drained enough just so I don't spill anymore. The barbs are... wow. Okay. There's a side-by-side comparison. And tubing-wise, this thing is huge. So here's your h100. Get a cleaner edge on there. Alright, that looks a little better. The h100, the tubing itself, including the ribs, let's see, I should be able to measure this both ways. If you want to go SAE, we're looking at 3/8 outer diameter on the rib itself. On the piping, excluding the rib, it's a 5/16 outer diameter. Now the inner diameter of this, let's go over here. I'll take the barb. If you wanted to replace on an h100, I would probably recommend a 1/4 inch ID piece of tubing. Or if we go over to the metric side, it looks like 6mm inner diameter is where you're going to be working with. Yeah, you're going to look, it's either going to be a 1/4 or a 6mm inner diameter tubing to replace the one on the h100. Now, I was going to say I was going to do this metric also, because this was made in China, so it should be metric. The outer, smaller than a 10, larger than an 8. So I'm going to say 9mm on the large rib. And the smaller one, we're looking at 8. Inner diameter, it's about 6. So we've got 6mm or 1/4 inch inner diameter piping going onto the original h100 240 radiator. Now this thing, even though after the tubing was on there, I wasn't sure how much this was just kind of fluff, but That almost looks like something you'd have on a heat exchanger in your car. Barb size, let's do this guy. I would say probably a 3/8 inner diameter piece of tubing. If you want to have a real snug, 5/16 at the smallest. Bring it over to metric. You can use a 10 mil ID or a 9 mil ID piece of tube. So basically the outer diameter of this would be like the largest portion of this. EVGA came out with the all-in-ones recently, and they are also using Asetek. They make most everything you see here, and they just basically brand it for the different companies. So I guess the main reason I wanted to do this is there have been a few people wanting to modify these or change the tubing out, and usually if you follow the forum posts that are coinciding with this idea of just like this one, you can see this large tube here, and well, here's the ones that came out the other ones, just nasty looking. And there's a lot of conflicting information. Some of them say the barbs are a certain size, some are saying tubes a certain size, some are saying screw it, just put a tube over this tube. This one looks so much larger, but there's a reason for it, and we're gonna have to dig in here to find out exactly. But I can already tell on the side, these barbs appear to be slightly larger, but not as large as they appear to be. The pump itself, we are not concentrating on that today, because I don't have one to compare it with. This is just the GTX pump, and this is what they come with. I have had 0 issues out of this. However, I have 2 of these, so this will be my sacrificial one for your benefit. I'm gonna let these tubes sit over here and make some room to make a mess. So now we are going to remove these tubes off the barbs here. And immediately I see a difference. These are both aluminum radiators. This one, the barbs are aluminum. And the first thing I see here, these ones are appearing to be plastic, or hang on a second, let me scratch a little of this. These are aluminum also. It's just the powder coating kind of threw me off. Even holding this tube next to this one, if you can see in here, the diameter of this from the h100 seems a little bit smaller. It almost looks like the diameter of whatever this is almost the size of what this is in the outer ribs. So let's check it out. As far as I've seen, to take these off, I'm using a Alpha blade. These are stainless steel. They're made basically for people to do window tint and things like that. They're very high quality blades. What I'm doing, just going to slit this retainer here and get this out of here. Okay. It's kind of like a bucket here. Not cut myself, but take this off. Almost there. Oh, there it goes. Alright. So the first piece that I just kind of notched off of here, let's see, it's kind of just a piece of plastic. And it appears that this is just to cover this is here just to cover the end of this rubber hose and this piece of tape, which is holding on this kind of nice braided. Now I can actually pull it back. Look at that. The braided sleeving actually pulls right off. Oh, it's got the little tape. Now you can see the hose. This is how large this hose is. So this one is a rubber. It's got a really thick wall on it, and there's your h100. Major difference there. Pop this off, and then I'll take some measurements, okay? So continuing on, these are the 2 radiators side by side. I finished taking off the secondary hose. fully drained the radiator, and I blew compressed air through one of the ports with the other hose all the way through the pump. These are fully dry and empty. There's nothing in any of these units. And in case you were interested, since I'm tearing this apart, we are looking at about 150 milliliters of liquid inside the GTX, minus whatever spilled out here, so that came out of it. So about, 150 milliliter that's actually filled inside there. And as far as barbs go, you can see the difference. The tank sizes are slightly different. This one is a hair larger. This one seems to be a lot larger. An overview, here's the barb sizes, ID and OD. Recommended sizes in both standard, SAE, and metric. The H100 is almost exactly 5 mil inside. A 6 millimeter inner diameter tubing would be the best. Also metric on this guy. H100i GTX barb is looking like probably 7 mil if you want to be precise with the inner diameter. 10's a little sloppy. As far as tubing goes, I would go with a 9 or a 10 millimeter inner diameter to go on this barb. Now going back to a SAE measurement, the smaller, the H100, is going to be about a 1/4 inch inner diameter tube, and the GTX is going to be, let's say, 7/16 is too large. We're going to be about 3/8 for an inner diameter to have a snug fit. Now these, as far as clamping, there's no clamping. Even the H100 was not clamped on. This was heated. This is a fairly hard plastic extrusion that they use on here, and usually what they do is heat this section, press it on. When it cools, it shrinks slightly and stays on there. There's no clamps or anything whatsoever. The same kind of concept going on with these guys, with real rubber hoses. They use these as the clamps right here, kind of retainers, and these were pushed down here with the pipe, and that's what held these on. There's no physical clamps, no hose clamps, anything whatsoever. That's kind of the difference between those two. Currently I have a bag of Tygon. It's basically medical grade tubing. It's great for water cooling because it's antibacterial. Nothing's, or was it the non-polymer? This is a 3/8 ID, and if we review over here, I was saying 3/8. If you look at this, it doesn't fit over the barb, but it just fits over the top. So a 3/8 tube right here. I've got 10 feet of this darn stuff. This should fit fairly snugly. It goes right down to the surface of the bottom. So there it is on there. I will have to clamp this. I'll bring this up so you can see it. This is a 3/8 tubing right here over the barb, like so. So this will have to be clamped because it's way too easy to just pull this off. Well, a little force. I don't like how little force that takes. We're clamping this for insurance purposes. I don't want this thing to go and pee all over my stuff. So if you want to do something wacky, I've seen people take these AIOs, replace the tubing, or like the previous message boards that I've seen as far as changing the tubing that no one seems to know how to do. They could take these and same thing, 3/8 ID. So if you have an H100, an original, the same 3/8 tube, you just pick a color of your choice. You can do whatever. What they were talking about is slitting this tube and wrapping it around it, and this is why. A 3/8 over this stock tubing, I can actually just slide this factory tubing right in there, no problem. So that's why they're saying tubing. Just leave the tubes instead of replace the tubes. I would replace them. These ridges will add restriction, but it's also a very slow, low-running pump that's on these. They don't have a ton of speed to them. I don't think it mattered too much. I'm doing something wacky with mine, so mainly that's why the comparison was being put together. And the last kind of overlook here, this one seems more of generic, before they started adding the extra branding on here. You see the Corsair logos on here and both sides, where the older style, there's nothing except for the sticker here, Corsair. And if you were curious about these while we had this thing sitting up here on the bench, these aren't glued on or anything. You can remove these, paint them, and put them back on without any fuss. They literally snap on with very little effort. There's little snappy doos here and holes to snap it in there. But this will not work on here because they never pre-drilled that. So if you want to paint these, change them around. If the logo's wrong on one side, you flip it over or do something crazy. I mean, you could do this. It just looks stupid because this is... See that shape in there? That's not cool. But if you had to, you know, maybe someone won't notice. There's my comparison. Obviously, the h100i GTX has better cooling for a reason. Slightly larger tank. The thickness of the radiator, I believe, is exactly the same. Let's go to metric, because that's how these were made. Okay, the tank, we're looking at 2.5 centimeters versus about 2. So it's about a 0.5 centimeter or 50 millimeters thicker on this one. Larger barbs. As far as fin spacing goes, it looks identical. Even the tubing running from tank to tank, which these little lines right here are actually the tubes where the water flows through. That looks identical. Yeah, fins per inch, same thing. What you're looking at is a slightly larger tank and a whole crapload larger fittings on there for actual real big tubing. Hopefully this will help you out. It will definitely help me out because I have 2 of these GTXs that I'm taking apart and I'm throwing in a custom loop because I'm doing something funky just to say I did it. And I guess that kind of concludes this. If you want to do something wacky, go with the larger one. Slightly more expensive for that reason. And I guess follow me along with the build. I'm about to build, well, I'm actually midway through a build, which could be kind of interesting to many people. So stay tuned to my channel. If you want to do the subscription thing, sure.